This is number seven podcast.
Number 7 podcast.
Welcome back to the number 7 podcast channel. Imagine being a woman fresh out of nursing school, and suddenly you're in the middle of the Vietnam War.
Wow.
That's Frankie McGrath's story.
It really makes you think about who we call heroes, especially back then when women weren't really seen in those roles.
Right, totally. So Frankie's from California,
Okay.
a wealthy family, kind of with a strong military background. Her dad, her granddad, they both served.
Yeah.
But then her brother, Finley, is killed in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And it changes everything for Frankie. She decides to enlist as a nurse.
And I bet her family wasn't too thrilled about that, right?
Especially her dad. He just couldn't understand it. You know, he saw the military as a man's world.
Yeah, a real clash of old school thinking and a young woman determined to do her own thing. Grief and duty all mixed together.
Exactly. So Frankie goes through basic training, and she's amazing, like really excels at everything.
Determined to prove herself.
To her family, yeah, but also to herself, I think.
That drive, you see it throughout her whole journey.
And then she's in Vietnam, a world away from her California life.
Yeah.
And it's intense, right from the start. Enemy fire, bomb threats, constant fear.
Tough to adjust to that.
They put her in the neurology ward first, a bit quieter than other places.
Still, you're seeing the effects of war firsthand.
Severe brain injuries, soldiers in comas. It's heavy stuff.
Makes you think about the real cost of war, the things you don't always see.
Absolutely. But Frankie, she's a fast learner. So they move her to the surgical unit. And there, it's nonstop. Horrific injuries, amputations, death all around.
Must have been incredibly demanding.
It takes a toll. She's making tough decisions under pressure, seeing so much suffering.
I can't even imagine.
And in all this chaos, she gets close to Dr. Jamie Callahan, a surgeon.
Finding connection amidst the chaos, huh?
Yeah, more than just colleagues, you know. They find comfort in each other, sharing the burden of what they're witnessing.
Must have been a lifeline in that environment.
It was. But then tragedy strikes. Jamie's helicopter is shot down. They bring him back to the hospital, badly injured. Frankie does everything she can, but he dies.
That must have been devastating for her.
It was. Another layer of trauma on top of everything else. After that, they transfer Frankie to the 71st EVAC hospital in Pleiku.
Closer to the front lines, right?
Much closer. Even more dangerous.
Wow. What was it like there?
Grueling. They were understaffed, not enough supplies, constant threat of attack. At one point, there was this massive rocket attack. So many casualties, they had to operate in the dark.
You have to be so brave to do that kind of work.
And it's in Pleiku that Frankie reconnects with Ry Walsh, her brother's best friend.
Oh, right. They knew each other before.
Briefly, yeah. But in Pleiku, they start to, connect amidst all the craziness.
That bit of normalcy in a very abnormal situation.
Exactly. It gave her some comfort, some hope, but it was short-lived. Frankie's tour of duty ended, and she went back to California.
I bet that was tough, coming home after everything she'd been through.
It was. Everyone wanted to forget about the war, move on. But Frankie, she couldn't just shake it off.
That disconnect must have been jarring.
Her family, they tried, but they didn't get it, you know? They didn't want to talk about it, just wanted her to be the Frankie they knew before.
Like it hadn't changed her at all.
Yeah, and especially her dad. He couldn't see past his idea of what a hero should be. Couldn't be proud of his own daughter for what she'd done.
It makes you think about how we treat veterans, especially the ones whose experiences don't fit the mold.
Exactly. And then, just as Frankie's trying to process all this, she gets the news that Ry was killed in action, just days before he was supposed to come home.
Oh my gosh.
It shattered her. She felt completely alone. She tried to get help at the VA clinic. They turned her away, said she wasn't a combat veteran.
That's just wrong.
It was. So many women who served went through that. Their sacrifices ignored, their trauma dismissed.
It's heartbreaking.
So feeling lost and rejected, Frankie reached out to Barb and Ethel, the nurses she knew from Vietnam.
Friends who understood.
They were there for her. You know, they got what she was going through. Ethel invited Frankie to stay with her in Virginia at her family's farmhouse, gave her a safe place to heal, to start over.
Away from all the judgment and expectations.
Exactly. And it was a turning point for Frankie. In Virginia, Frankie starts to find her footing again. She gets a job as a surgical nurse.
Using her skills, helping others.
It gave her purpose. And then she went to an anti-war protest in D.C. with Barb. And there she met Henry Acevedo.
The psychiatrist.
Yeah, he worked with Vietnam vets.
Wow, what a coincidence.
They started dating, And Henry, he was kind, stable, something Frankie really needed at that time.
But she was still carrying a lot of baggage from the war.
He was, especially about Rye. She threw herself into this organization that was trying to bring home POWs, fundraisers, letters, advocating for the families.
A way to honor his memory.
Yeah. And then Frankie's mom had a stroke, so she went back to California to be with her family, tried to make things right with her parents.
A second chance to reconnect.
It was. And while she's home, the war finally ends. And the first POWs start coming back. Frankie's watching the news, and she sees Rye getting off the plane, alive.
You're kidding. After all that time, they thought he was dead.
But then, as she's watching, this wave of confusion hits her. Because Rye is being greeted by a wife and daughter, a family she never knew about.
Oh my God. What a blow.
It ripped her apart. All those years, everything she thought she knew about Rye, it was a lie.
And how did she cope with that?
Not well. She started taking pills more and more. Her PTSD came back full force.
Understandable under those circumstances.
It was a downward spiral. Her job, her relationship with Henry, it all fell apart. And even though she knew Rye was married, they started an affair. She clung to this hope that he would leave his wife for her.
She was grasping at straws, trying to make sense of it all.
It was all of the pain, desperate for something to hold on to. But then she found out Rye's wife was pregnant again. That was it. He wasn't leaving his family.
What happened then?
Frankie overdosed? Accidental, but still. Her parents, they didn't know what else to do. They committed her to a psychiatric ward.
An intervention. Tough love.
They were desperate to help her. And it was there, in the ward, that Frankie finally got diagnosed with PTSD.
A turning point. Finally getting the help she needed.
It was. Last time, we left Frankie at a pretty low point, being admitted to a psychiatric ward after an overdose.
Yeah, but sometimes you gotta hit rock bottom before things can get better.
It was definitely a turning point for her. And guess who she finds running the ward?
Ooh.
Henry Acevedo, the psychiatrist she dated, the one she pushed away because of Rye.
Wow, what are the chances?
It's kind of crazy, right? But Henry, he's a good guy, dedicated to his work, really cares about helping veterans.
So he diagnoses Frankie with PTSD.
He does, which back then, especially for women vets, was not well understood at all. People didn't really get it.
Times were different. Mental health wasn't talked about like it is now.
No, it wasn't. Anyway, with Henry's help, Frankie starts to unpack all that trauma she'd been carrying around for years.
Therapy, I imagine.
Group therapy, yeah. Talking to other veterans, learning ways to cope with her symptoms. It was a long process, and it wasn't easy.
I bet. Facing those demons head on can't be fun.
She had so much guilt about her brother, anger at her family for not understanding, and of course the grief over Rye. It was all tangled up together.
Not just the war itself, but everything that came after. Trying to fit back into a world that's moved on, a family that doesn't really know what you went through.
Exactly. But through it all, she starts to realize something important. Her PTSD, it wasn't a weakness. It was actually proof of how strong she was, how she'd survived all that.
Reframing her experience, seeing it as a testament to her resilience.
Right. She also starts to see that some of the ways she coped in Vietnam, the tough exterior, pushing people away, they helped her survive there, but they weren't working for her anymore.
Makes sense. Different situations call for different approaches.
As her therapy went on, she starts to feel hope again. She remembers how much she loved being a nurse, how her experiences could actually help others.
Finding purpose again, that's huge.
It was. So after 8 weeks, they decide she's well enough to leave the ward. She goes back to her parents' house, but she's not the same Frankie. She's changed, more self-aware, stronger.
A new chapter.
And her family, they notice it too, especially her dad. They see that she's faced her demons and come out the other side. It was like a weight had lifted.
That must have been a good feeling for everyone.
It was. And then Frankie tells her parents she's moving to Montana.
Montana. Wow, that's a big change.
They were worried, of course, but this time they listened. They were finally starting to understand her, to respect her decisions.
That's what she needed from them all along, right?
Yeah. So Frankie sells everything, packs her bags, and heads off to Montana, ready for a fresh start, a place where she can finally heal and be herself.
So she ends up in Montana, and what happens next?
But Montana is beautiful, wide open spaces, rugged landscapes.
I can see how that would appeal to someone looking for peace and quiet.
Right. Frankie finds this rundown farmhouse and buys it with the money she got from selling her place in California. It was a fixer-upper, needed a lot of work, but it was hers.
A project to focus on.
Exactly. And she didn't do it alone. She asked Donna, another nurse she met in the ward, to come with her. Donna was a Vietnam vet too, also struggling with PTSD.
So they're both starting over together.
Yeah. They've fixed up the farmhouse, turned it into a ranch, and call it the last best place.
The last best place. I like that. Sounds hopeful.
It was more than just a home, though. It was a sanctuary for women veterans. Like Frankie and Donna, they'd come back from the war, but they didn't fit in back home. Nobody understood what they'd been through.
So this ranch became a safe haven.
It did. They came from all over the country, looking for healing, for community, a place where they could finally let their guard down, be themselves.
The power of shared experience, it can be so healing to connect with people who just get it.
Frankie, she really stepped up. She'd been through so much herself, and she used that experience to help others. She listened, she shared her own struggles, she helped them find their way.
Turning her pain into purpose, that's amazing.
It was. And at the last best place, they didn't just heal, they rediscovered their strength, their joy. They formed friendships, laughed, cried, and started building new lives.
Sounds like a truly special place.
It was. It showed the world that women veterans are strong, resilient, and they deserve to be recognized and supported. And it all started with Frankie, one woman determined to heal and to help others do the same.
An incredible story.
We left off with Frankie getting this invitation that takes her right back to where it all began, Washington, D.C.
1982. The whole city's kind of buzzing, a mix of excitement and sadness. It's the unveiling of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
That wall, the black granite with all those names etched on it. Powerful symbol, remembering everyone who died in the war.
Really drives home the cost of conflict.
For Frankie, it was personal. She's going there to honor the people she lost, to face her past, maybe find some closure.
Makes sense.
So she gets to the wall, and it's overwhelming. The size, the beauty, the sadness of it all. Each name, a life cut short.
A reminder of the human cost.
She runs her fingers along the granite, looking for Finley's name, her brother. And when she finds it, it all comes flooding back. Sadness, pride, missing him.
A powerful moment.
Then she thinks of Jamie Callahan, the surgeon, the one she loved, the one she thought died in Vietnam.
Right.
She looks for his name, expecting to see it there, but she keeps looking. It's not there.
That must have been confusing.
She's about to give up, and then someone calls her name. Turns around, and there he is, Jamie Callahan, alive.
No way.
It was like a dream. She stares at him, taking it all in. His eyes, that scar on his face from the helicopter crash, the one she thought killed him.
Incredible.
She's in shock. So many emotions all at once. Happy, confused, relieved, a million questions.
I can imagine.
Jamie, he sees she's overwhelmed and explains everything. He did survive the crash, but barely. Horrible injuries, years of rehab. His family kept it quiet, wanted to protect him. He was in a coma for months. They weren't even sure he'd make it.
So he just disappeared.
He says coming to the memorial, it was his way of remembering, of honoring those who didn't make it back.
Facing the past head on.
And then he says he saw Frankie's name on the list for the hospital reunion. Couldn't resist coming to see her. Wanted to thank her for saving his life.
After all those years.
He reaches into his pocket and pulls out this small stone, worn smooth from being touched so much. It's the same stone Frankie put in his bag before he was evacuated. The one that said, "You fight," and her name, McGrath.
Wow.
He kept it with him all those years, a reminder of her belief in him.
Right.
Her words on that stone, they kept him going when things were darkest.
A symbol of hope, of connection.
And Frankie's overcome with emotion. She touches the stone, it feels so familiar. All those years of wondering, of pain, just melts away. She's so grateful he's alive.
That must have been an incredible moment.
They stood there, talking, catching up on lost time. They'd both been changed by the war, but they were survivors.
Scars fade, but the memories remain.
Seeing Jamie again, it gave Frankie closure, answered all those questions she had, and it gave her hope for the future, a new appreciation for life.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, healing is possible.
As Frankie left Washington, she felt a sense of peace. The past didn't weigh her down anymore. She'd learned so much, honored those she lost, and found her own way to heal.
What a powerful story.
Frankie's journey shows us the strength of the human spirit, the power of resilience. It reminds us that we need each other, that asking for help is okay, and that there's always hope. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Frankie McGrath's incredible life. Her story, and the story of all the women who served in Vietnam, they deserve to be heard and remembered. We hope you learned something new today. You have a little more understanding and appreciation for what these veterans went through. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Number 7 podcast channel for more stories that matter. We'll see you next time.